Good morning, my friends. Welcome to our New Testament challenge. Today, I'm going to be sharing some thoughts with you on the 13th chapter of the book of Acts. Acts chapter 13. We are in the midst of the growth of the early church. We've been focusing on Barnabas and Saul, who would become known as Paul. And so we see some of what's going on. We see as the last two chapters, they are going to new places. They're speaking in the synagogues. A lot of people are interested in coming to them, but it also stirs up controversy. And so it's just interesting. They say, people try to attack them, and they're driven out of town. They, shake the dust off their feet, and then at the very end, and the church was glad, and the Holy Spirit was active. And so I think that's a good reminder for us today that God works, brings glory to his name, grows the church in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of strife, in the midst of struggle, in the midst of all that's going on, the division. God will continue to grow his church. And so that's good news for us. So Barnabas and Saul were commissioned there at Antioch. They said, send them to the place, to the work I'm calling them to. So they were sent by the Holy Spirit. They went down to Seleucia, and then they went to Cyprus. And when they arrived at Salamis, they began talking in the synagogues. And interesting, they ran into a couple of magicians, false prophets, people who have power and who were trying to convince others to ignore them, but they persevered and they overcame. And then they became in Antioch of Pisidia, another Antioch, and although John, however, went back to Jerusalem. And so they began to speak, and they talked about, they kind of gave some history and some explanation as to why Jesus is the one that Jews have been waiting for. And at the end of the day, they said, as they were going out, the people urged them to speak again the next Sabbath. And says, when the meeting of the synagogue broke up, many Jews and devout converts followed them and spoke to them and continued them. And it says, the next Sabbath, almost the entire city had gathered to hear the word of the Lord. You can imagine just what a week did. People were talking about it. You got to come here, you got to come here. And so they came, and the Jews were filled with jealousy, and they were trying to contradict what was spoken by Paul. But Paul and Barnabas spoke boldly and said, this is what we need to do. And said, I have set you be a light to the Gentiles, so that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. And when the Gentiles heard this, they were thrilled. That means, hey, we're involved in this. We are not just watching on the outside, but this ministry, this gospel, this good news is for us as well. But the Jews said, incited the devout women of high standing and the leading men of the city, and they stirred up persecution against Paul and Barnabas and drove them out. Again, kind of like the book of Judges in the Old Testament. You hear the same story, different verse. This happens over and over again. They have success. People get riled up against them. They leave, often hurriedly, but the church continues to grow and bless. And it says, and the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. So Saul at this point, and Paul and Barnabas, are doing well and continue to preach the gospel, and the church continues to grow, and the disciples continue to mature. So that's good news, my friends. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you tomorrow.